Welcome to the 5-Week Linguist Show. If you want to learn a language or you teach a language, you've come to the right place. Join Janina each week for tips, resources, and advice for making engaging language learning happen anytime, anywhere.
Welcome to the 5-Week Linguist Show. This week, week 2, we're going to talk about learning vocabulary. Learning vocabulary in a new language is absolutely vital if you want to learn a new language, clearly. So we're going to talk just about learning vocabulary. The very first thing that I want to talk about are some ways to really focus in and learn vocabulary independently if you're not in a formal class or you're not living abroad or you don't have an opportunity to have regular interaction in the language. So the very first secret is to learn about chunking. And the secret to being able to express yourself in a language is to know enough words and phrases. And I realize that that's very obvious, but I think it bears mentioning because once you get enough words and phrases down, you can start creating with language. And going back to language proficiency research, when you are just memorizing words and phrases and you're building that, you're in the novice level. And if you follow the Common European Framework for Reference, that's their A level. Once you have enough of those words and phrases working together, you move into the ACTFL intermediate level or the CEFR B level. So the most important thing, and the way to really speed up this progress, is to be able to learn survival language. That's the very first thing that I would teach people. So when you think about all these factors, right? You need enough words and phrases to be able to communicate. And your goal is to be able to know enough words and phrases to be able to create messages, to be able to say things. I want you to think about learning in chunks. So instead of learning sort of a group of words that they're all useful, let's face it, but you really want to focus in on the useful communicative words and phrases. So think about words like I need or I want. Those are things that are going to get you communicating really quickly. So one of a free tool that I would recommend would be, or almost free, really, depending on how you approach this, is creating your own playlists. So I've done some for you. If you look at, I'll link to free language books, and they're basically collections that I've made of playlists in the form of a sort of ebook with linked audio. And it's all about getting started in a language. It's language for travel and beginners. And I love travel for language because if you look at a phrase book, everything is 100% focused on getting you communicating. They're not talking about grammar. They're not talking about really much else. It's all about getting you what you need. So it's a great place to start. Another way to do playlists, I'll link to making your own playlists there, is taking those little files and then making your own playlist. So you can actually take those little chunks of vocab for communication and you can create your own playlist. And I actually really like Google Translate for this. I'd say that you really always have to approach this with caution because you have to be smarter than it, knowing what is actually the right context or not. But the beautiful thing about Google is that it's just getting better and better and better because they scan documents that were translated by humans. So it really helps. You can actually take those words and phrases that you've created that you need, and you can record them on your phone, just on voice memos, and then make your own little playlists. It's great. I know there's another tool called Rhinospike, and you can actually get those recorded by a native speaker. I do hope that my free language books, if you look, there's, I want to say 11 languages, that you'll find what you need. And if it's not what you need, take a look at one of them anyway, and consider how you might adapt that to what you need, right? You can kind of use that as a base for what you want to do. The next way I want to talk about vocabulary is memorization. So memorization sometimes in my world of language teaching gets kind of some bad press. So basically, as we talked about just a couple of minutes ago, we talked about chunking and about knowing enough words and phrases to be able to put those words and phrases together to create with language. You can do that by language you acquire, right? By really soaking language up, by reading, by listening. But you can also do it with just old-fashioned memorization. And this works. So I used to be an actress, and not for a long time, and I really love languages, so teaching languages was definitely the right thing for me. But I got some really important takeaways that have really improved my language learning and teaching from acting. So in a play, somebody learns somebody else's lines so much, this stuff, the black and white text, and completely brings it to life. And they do it through memorization. And they memorize it so well that it becomes a part of them. And I think that's a great takeaway for a language learner, right? That you have that power well within you to take your script, which can be your dialogue, right? What are from these words and phrases are you going to need to be able to say? You can even write out a little dialogue. A lot of language programs are based on these dialogues. Pimsleur, for example, where you learn both parts and you learn them really, 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 really well to where they become a part of you. It really sticks. So while the ideal way to learn a language would be how you the acquisition, the way you learned your first language through meaningful context, this can really accelerate that process. The next thing we're going to talk about are phrase books. And phrase books serve up thousands of useful words and phrases to get people communicating right away. We talked about that. Create your own, use mine. I think there are some great ones that are very economical and very effective. I love Berlitz. I love Rough Guides. There's so many great ones out there. Do a search on Amazon. And what's great now is with ebooks, you've got audio with them. It's fantastic. And I created a video for you on making your own. Another way is vocabulary columns. And I'm going to link to the activity. I won't talk about it in depth. But basically, it's a piece of paper. You pick words and phrases that you want to learn. I would say no more than 10 to 15. You write them down in a column in the target language. You go to the next column and you recognize them and you study, and then you fold over the target language and you go trying to translate from English or your native language back to the target language. And then you study, you're going to unfold it and study what you missed, and then fold it over again, and you keep going back and forth, and very quickly you will learn 10 or 15 phrases. I talk about it in detail. I'll link to that post. The next one are tasks. So when we talked about chunking early on, and we talked about travel and phrase books, I think a really powerful tool is just get a notebook And I love to keep task notebooks. Now, what's really important about tasks are you're not learning sort of seemingly unrelated words. When you're in foreign language, it's sort of our secret weapon. We want people to learn how to do certain tasks. So a task can be something as simple as greeting somebody, and it can be as complicated as giving a speech on an area of expertise and everything in between. So it's about actually being able to communicate something really specific in the language. So again, back to travel, being able to think about being able to order in a restaurant or being able to get help in an emergency, for example. These task notebooks are places for you to write out little plays and dialogues, as we talked about with acting. What do you need to complete this task? And then you can use any of these other methods that we talked about to really learn these deeply. But this is a great place to collect all of the things that you need. I'm going to include something for the gold list method. This is one I would do if I had more sort of downtime. I do a lot of my language learning on the go, though I love my periods of time where I get to actually kind of sit and do languages, and this gold list method is a really fun one. And she talks about, you're going to kind of focus a bit on a set of words, a set of vocabulary, and you're constantly reviewing it as you build. And some of the tasks, the ones that you didn't know so well, sort of spill over. She always describes it with a cup of tea, and that just, I just love that sitting down at the table, learning languages. But again, I do a lot of mine on the go, on my phone, because that's what works in my life. But if you've got half an hour a day, these are great ways to completely learn a language for free. As you progress a little bit, I would try Fluency notebooks. Now, I love these, and I love doing these with groups of people I'm working with. So they're slightly different from task notebooks. So the task notebook, you're going to sort of collect everything that you need to do a task. And that Fluency notebook, you're going to really put it into practice. So I love to take my phone, which is my ultimate language learning lab, and pick a topic. So this is great after you've had a bit of exposure to languages, maybe after you've spent some time doing playlists or some time reading or some time in gold list method, vocabulary columns, podcasts, whatever it is that you're doing. And of course, I switch mine up every 5 weeks because it keeps it fresh and fun and keeps things really effective. Constantly doing something, and the things that are maybe not as fun as I'd like them to be, I've always got something else to look forward to. Because sometimes you do have to get through the rough spots, but there's always something fresh and fun to look forward to. And it keeps me accountable and always keeps me in languages and it keeps the variety going so I don't give up. Pick a topic. Let's say the family, and you set a timer and you write, and you don't let yourself look up any words. And then when the timer's up, you go look up words. So when you're beginning to do these, I would just keep them really short. I would say even 3, 4, 5 minutes, and you write everything that you can. And when the timer goes off, you go back and you look up the words that you didn't know. It is a huge way to progress really quickly in language. You will be shocked at how fast you progress. As you become more proficient, make those longer periods of times. I would even use voice memos, which I tend to do because, again, if I'm sitting maybe for a few minutes, I would have more energy to talk and record in voice memos than to sit down and write in a notebook. But that's just my life, though I really love the Fluency notebooks. But if you find handwriting frustrating, the voice memos works great. And it's great speaking practice too, and it'll really help you work through some shyness. The last two things I want to talk about, I talked about at the beginning. All of the things that I talked about today were mostly focused on independent language learning, things that you can do deliberately to really build your vocabulary and do it effectively that don't take a lot of time and that are not very expensive. But I wanted to talk about ways that you can really build quickly as well, and I would definitely make them part of my repertoire. The first one is reading. Reading is the best way to learn a language. You will learn all this vocabulary and grammar in context. We talk about it another week, but it's so important that it bears mentioning. And I put one link of a great tool to help you read on the web, and it's fantastic. It will help you understand, it will make flashcards, and it will give you suggestions, which is great. And then I would also talk about, it bears mentioning italki. We'll talk about that in another lesson, but again, you're going to, even as a beginner, find somebody who is experienced speaking with non-native speakers, and not only will you practice the vocabulary that you know, you will get to soak up all of their vocabulary, and you will acquire a lot of vocabulary. You can even record the sessions and listen, but again, we'll go more into detail on that in another lesson. So until next week, à tout à l'heure.
Thank you for listening to the 5-Week Linguist Show with Janina Klimas. Join us each week here and visit us at reallifelanguage.com/reallifelanguageblog for more resources for learning and teaching languages.